Welcome back to this course. So in our previous section, we have learned about Express and we have also built a movie app. Okay. So before moving on toward our databases like MongoDB, we have to learn 2-3 important concepts. Okay. So these are callbacks, promises, and use of async and await in Node.js. Okay. These are very important concepts that you must need to understand before moving on. Okay. So in this section, we are not going to take a very complex example. The purpose is just to understand what is callback hell, what is promises, what is async and await, and how we can use them. Okay. So I will explain it in a simple way by using a simple example. And when we will move towards our next section and towards the projects, we are definitely going to use these concepts. Okay. Okay, so I will see you in the next video in which we learn about callback hell. Welcome back to this course. So this is our second video of this section in which we are going to learn about callback hell. So in simple words, callback means a lot of callbacks that are nested in each other. Okay, and this makes the code hard to read and debug. Okay, so let's see with the help of an example. Now you can see from this diagram, this is a very good diagram to understand the callback hell. You can see that we have a lot of callbacks nested with each other. Okay, so this is called the callback hell. Callback hell is also known as pyramid of DOM. Okay, actually this is the very best example. You can see that of floppy disk that please insert disk 1. So, and once we read that, then we have to insert the second disk. So for that we have to pass another callback inside the first one. Okay, so when the disk 2 reading is completed, then we have to insert the disk 3 and then disk 4 and 5, 6 and so on. So you can see that how difficult is it to read this code. So this is what we call the callback hell. Okay, so now let's create our own code to understand the callback hell. Okay, so this code is not too much complex. I have taken the simple example that we have used before. Okay, so let's see it. First of all, I open my Visual Studio Code and I have a folder with the name callback hell. Okay, so in this section I'm not going to use this terminal. I'm going to use the separate terminal because I want to display all the movie names from API that we have used in our previous section. Okay, so I'm going to use the external terminal. You can simply go to search and type here git, and you can see that git bash. You can open that and go to the path where you have your folder like in callback hell. Okay, so first of all I'm going to create a new file in here with the name like app.js. Simple. Okay, so first of all, the idea of this app is that we have a text file with the name movie.txt. Okay, so in that txt file we have our movie name that we want to search. Okay, so what happens is when we start this app, it is going to read the name of that movie from that file, and then we pass that movie name to the API, and then API will send back our data, and we have to display all the movie names that we get after API call. Okay, so first of all I am going to type here const fs because I want to read data from file. So I type here fs require and I type here fs, and also we have to install a package called request because we want to request from API. So request equals to require request. Okay, and after that we have to read data from the file. So I'm simply going to type here fs.read file. We have also used this example before of reading file and API. Okay, so I simply pass here the name of the file, that is movie.txt, which we are going to create in a minute. And after that I have to pass a callback here that says error, or we have the movie name there, so we simply type here query that we want to search. Okay, and after that in here first of all we have to check that if there is some error, then I'm simply going to return console.log that error. Okay, otherwise we have to search for that movie through API, and then we have to display all the titles of that movie. Okay, so I simply type here request, then I have to pass here the URL, and then I'm going to pass an additional parameter here which is the timeout. Okay, so I type here timeout. Now this parameter is going to do is when we just call our API to this request package, then what happens is sometimes due to slow internet connection it gives the error that we are out of internet. So this parameter is going to help in that. This is going to set the time to 0. Okay, and after that we have to type here the callback. So I simply type here first of all the error, then the response, and after that we get the body, Okay, so in here, first of all, if we check error and then return console.log the error. Okay, otherwise we want to convert that data to JSON. So I use the parse method and convert our string to the JSON. Okay, and after that I have to use the for each loop to display all the content that is inside movies. So what I do, I simply type here movies, and we know that when we call it, you can see that we have results and then we have the original title here. Okay, so what I do, I simply use this, and then I will, every time I loop through this original title and display it on the screen. Okay, so I simply go back and type here movies dot results, and after that I use the for each loop, for each, and here I type movie, and then I simply console dot log the movie dot original title. Let me see that first. I just copy it from here, go back and paste it right here. Okay, also you have to pass a URL, so I simply go back and copy it from here and paste it right here. Okay, and just I'm going to remove it from here, and let's concatenate here the query dot toString to convert that into string, like that. Okay, so this is our app. So let's save it and create the txt file here. So I type here new file and just type here movie.txt, and in it I simply type here Avengers. Save that, go back, and let's run this application. So first of all, I simply go here and type here npm init and press enter, and then I have to install the package called npm I request dash save. Okay, so it's stuck right there. Press Ctrl C and just type it again. Okay, so our package is now installed here, so I simply type here node app.js, and here we go, we get our all movie titles right here. Okay, so I go back and simply explain it. First of all, I have required this fs module and then this request package. Okay, and after that I have simply read the file which is movie.txt and just pass that movie name which is present in this txt file to API right here, and then you simply fetch that result, and using the for loop I have simply displayed all the title of that movies here, right? So you can see that this is a callback, and in this callback I have another callback, this one. Okay, so this is not a very complex example, we just have two callbacks here. We can make this a lot better than this, okay, by using the promises and async and await. Okay, and just think about that, if we have about 4 or 5 or 6 nested callbacks here, then it is very hard for us to understand as a programmer. Okay, so for that we have to use promises and async and await, which are introduced in ES6. Okay, so this is the basic idea of callback hell. So in our next video we are going to solve this problem with the help of promises. Okay, I don't have use any promises right now here, but in our next example when we will discuss about promises, we are going to convert the same code and write it in form of promises. Okay, so I will see you in the next video. Okay, so welcome back to this course. So in our previous video I have seen that what is callback hell, and we have also write this example here that has 2 callbacks. Okay, so in this video we are going to convert the same example by using the help of promises and make it more better code. Okay, first of all, what are promises? A promise is basically an advancement of callbacks in Node.js. Okay, while developing your any application, you may encounter that you are using a lot of nested callback functions. Okay, so to avoid that callback hell, we use promises. Okay, so in this video we are going to use promises to avoid callbacks that we have used right now here. Okay, this doesn't mean that we are going to exclude the callbacks from the Node.js. We know that Node.js use a lot of callbacks. Okay, The main idea is that we have to write a code that is easy for us to understand, okay? And we are going to write the same code with promises, and after that you will realize that the use of promises really help the programmers to write clean and efficient code, okay? So what I am going to do here is I simply create a new file in this callback help folder and just type here like promises.js, like that, okay? So first of all, I simply type here const fs equals to require fs module, like this. So I simply type here const request equals to require, I simply type here request, like that. And now before reading the file, I have to create a promise first, okay? So what I do, I simply type here const, I type here read movie file promise, okay? I will explain all the code after just writing that, so don't get confused with that right now. So I simply type here equals to, and I type here file name that we're going to pass, and after that we have to type here return new promise, because we always have to return a promise. So I simply type here resolve and reject, and that's it, okay? So we have just created this read movie file promise, and in that we have a function, okay? We just pass the file name, and then we have to return a new promise from here. In promise we have two parameters, one is resolve and one is reject. If the file reading process is successful, then we say that our promise is resolved, and if there is some error, then we can say that our promise is rejected, okay? So I simply type here fs.read file, I type here file name at the top, and then I have to type here callback, that is error and data, okay? And after that I simply type here if error, then I have simply reject that, and otherwise resolve, and we pass the data like this, okay? So first of all, as I explained before, first of all I created this read movie file name and this function that takes file name as a parameter, okay? So what we do, we simply return a promise from here, okay? And then we have two parameters of promise, resolve and reject. When we read this file by using this read file method, if the reading process is successful, then we will simply pass that resolve data, means that this promise is resolved, and if there is some error, we can say that reject error, that this promise is rejected, okay? And after that I simply type here this read movie function, that is read movie file promise, and in here I simply type the file name that I want to read. So I simply type here movie.txt, okay? Now I have to get the data from this promise, okay? So I simply type here the dot then method. We can use this dot then method only with a promise, okay? So you can see that this is the function in which we are returning the promise, okay? We cannot use this dot then without a promise, okay? So this is basically returning a promise, so that's why I type here dot then. If the reading process is successful, then what to do? Then simply I have to return the API with this query here. So I simply type here return, and I simply just go back to my previous code and copy this API from here. Simply copy it and paste it here. And that's it, okay? And after that, when we will return this query, then we have to use this URL, which is this API, and then we have to request that data, okay? So I simply go back and I just copy this code from here, this one, simply copy that, Control C, and I paste it here. Okay, so I just remove this URL from here and pass here this URL, which is right here, which you have returned right from here. Okay, and after that, if there is some error, I also remove this from here, this error, and now I have to use the dot catch. Okay, so this is dot then block, and then I have to type here dot catch error, and I simply type here console.log the error here. Okay, so I have just completed the program. First of all, I just require the modules. Then I have to create a promise, because whenever we read the file, there is nothing that is returning the promise. So we create our own function that returns a new promise that has two parameters, resolve and reject. If our file reading process is successful, then we simply say that the data is resolved, and if there is some error, then we say that reject because there is some error. Okay, so in this case our data is resolved there. Okay, and below that, when I call this read movie file promise function, I pass the name of the file, which is movie.txt, and if this is successful, this promise is resolved, then I have to use the dot then method. Then I simply get the data from that, which is query, and create my URL like this. Okay, then I simply return that. Then I have used this dot then method. First of all, this is going to run, and then this will run. Okay, we just return that URL, and after that we use this request package, pass the URL here, timeout, and then this callback, and then we have parse our body, which is string, and then we console.log our movies. Okay, so I simply save it and go back to my GitHub and clear the screen. First of all, I type here node promises.js. If I press enter, you are going to get the same result right here. Okay, now I can make it more close to promises if I just remove this callback also. Okay, because this request also returns a promise. Okay, so for that I have to change this request to request promise like this. Okay, now what I do, I simply type here this request URL, then I just simply remove it from here, and I type here this one, and then dot then method, and in here the body that we are going to return like this. Okay, then I simply cut it from here and paste it right here. Simply remove that, click on format document. Okay, so what I have to do here is, first of all, this request promise package also returns the promise. We don't have to create a promise like we have done here for reading the file. Okay, so request also return a promise, so that's why I have used dot then here. Okay, so request.url, and if it's successful, if the promise is resolved, then we have to pass that body and parse it into JSON. After that, we have to display the all titles of those movies. I simply save it, go back to my git bash. First of all, I install the package called npm I request promise -- save. Okay, so package is installed right now here. So simply clear the screen and type here node promises.js, and we get the same result again. Okay, so now you can see that we have made our code much more cleaner than this one. Okay, so this is the ugly code, but this is using the promises, and it is really easy to understand for us. Okay, you can see that we don't have to create this promise all the time, because these promises were introduced in ES6. Okay, as you can see that when we use this request, we don't have to create promise for this request. Okay, because request is made by using the promises. Okay, so for reading the file, we don't have any function that returns the promise, so we have simply created our own promise right here. Okay, and after that, we have used this dot then method and dot catch method. Okay, if there is some error in any of this code, then this catch function is going to catch that error and display that on the console. Okay, so I hope that you understand about promises. Now we can also make this code more cleaner when we use our async and await. Okay, so that we are going to use in our next video. I know that this is a little bit confusing topic, but you have to learn that because we are going to use promises, async, await all the time in our next videos. Okay, so don't get confused with that too much right now, because we are going to use all these concepts in our project and also in our next videos. Okay, so then you have a better understanding that how this is working. This is just a quick and simple example to demonstrate that how promises works. Okay, so we have created our own promise and also we have used the built-in promise which is in this request package. Okay, so I hope that you understand. Anyhow, if you feel any problem by understanding anything about promises, you can definitely ask me a question. I am always here to help you. So that's it for this video. I will see you in the next video in which we learn about async and await. Welcome back to this course. In our previous video, we have learned about the promises, and today in this video, we are going to learn about the async and await. Okay, so this is a more convenient way to deal with our code. Okay, so let's understand it with the help of this same example. We are going to convert this same code by using the async and await. So I simply create a new file here with the name async await.js. Okay, so first of all, I copy these lines because these lines will be remain same. So I simply copy it and go back and paste it here. Okay, and after that I have to use the async and await to make this code more better. So first of all, I am going to type here const get all movies method, and I simply type here async Okay, so why I have used this async method here. We know that in Node.js we don't have to block the main thread, we don't have to block the event loop. Okay, so what we have do here is we have made this function asynchronous so that our code don't get blocked. Okay, and in here first of all what we are going to do here is first of all we are going to call this promise, that is read movie file promise. Okay, so I simply type here read movie file promise and pass the name of the file in it, that is movie.txt, like this. Okay, and let's now use the await keyword with it. I simply type here await and store it in a variable called query. Okay, so we have just called the promise here and then we have stored it in this query variable, and also we have used the await here. Now what this await is going to do here is this is going to pause all the process and wait until this promise is resolved or rejected. Okay, so await stops here and wait until this promise is completed and then store that result in this query. Okay, but this is not going to pause or block the main thread or event loop. What happen is, as we are using this asynchronous function here, event loop will move this function to the background and this function is going to process in the background of that application. Okay, this line is not going to block the main thread, but in fact this is going to block the process of this function only. Okay, so I get my query here, which is this Avengers in this movie.txt file, and after that I simply type here the URL, let URL equals to, I simply go back and copy it from here, Control C and paste it here. Okay, this query is this one that we get from here right now. Okay, now let's use this request method. So I simply type here request and I type here this URL, I want to request this URL, and then I simply type here the timeout parameter to 0, and then after that I have to use the dot then method because this request returns a promise, and body, and in here first of all I type here let movies equals to json dot parse this body, and after that I simply type here the for loop, which is right here. So I simply copy it from here and paste it here. like this, and that's it. Also have to write here await keyword. Okay, so what will happen here is, first of all, we have called this method here that will return a promise, and await is going to pause all the process of this function only and wait until this promise is resolved or rejected. Once the process is completed, stores the result in this query, and then in second line we have a variable URL that is building that API URL. Okay, and after that we have to request that link. So I simply use this request here by using the .then method, because this request is going to return the promise. Okay, and after that, why I have used this await keyword here, because I want to pause all the process until this code is completed. Okay, and now you may notice that one thing, that we don't have write any line of error handling in this function. So what I'm going to do here, I'm simply going to use the try catch block. Okay, I hope that you know about try catch block. What this try catch block is going to do here, I simply type here try, then I have to type here catch any error, and then console.log that error. Okay, and I simply move this code in the try block, copy it from here, Control X, I simply paste it here, click on format document like this. Okay, so what this try catch block is going to do here is, simply we have our all code in this try block. This will try all the code, and if there is some error in any of these lines, then this catch block is going to catch that error and display that error on the console. Okay, so that's why we have used the try catch block here to handle our errors. Okay, and at the last we have to call this function that is get all movies. So I simply copy it from here, and at the end I paste it here like this, and just save it, and let's run this program. So I go back and clear the screen and type here node async await.js and press enter, and we get all the movies again. Okay, so you can see that we have made our code more robust than the previous one. We have used the async and await to make it more easier and simpler. Okay, so we are also going to use this async and await in our projects, so that's why it is important for us to understand all these concepts before we move on. Okay, so I hope that you understand. I just repeat this program once again. First of all, the same function that is going to return a promise for this file, and after that we have created a method called get all movies that has used the async, because we want to make this method async so we don't block the process of the main thread. Okay, and after that I have used this try catch block to handle my errors. So if there is any error in these lines, then this catch block is going to catch that error and display it on the console. Okay, otherwise what happens is, first of all, we have just call this method that is read movie file promise and pass the name of the movie.txt file in it. After that I have used this await keyword because I want to pause the process of this function until this promise is get resolved or rejected. Okay, and after this I have built the URL and also request that URL and display all the data on the console. And also I have used this await keyword with this because I want to pause again the whole process until this is going to complete. Again I repeat that this is not going to pause the process of the main thread or event loop, because this function is running on the background of the process. Okay, so it is only going to pause this function only. Okay, so I hope that you understand. And again, don't get confused with any of these concepts right now. I just have explained all these concepts with the help of simple example. But when we move on, we are going to use these concepts in our projects and small applications. Then you will have a better idea that why we are using this. Okay, so I hope that you understand. I will see you in the next section.